Prison transports smelled the same across the galaxy. Recycled air mixed with fear and the bitter tang of disinfectant. Lucy Grant sat in her transparent, holding cell among dozens of alien warriors, each one massive compared to her small frame. The Galactic Council had packed this ship with war criminals and captured soldiers after the Frontier Wars ended, sending them off to various detention facilities scattered across controlled space. She looked young, barely 19, with sun-darkened skin, and calloused hands that told stories of harsh living. Her brown hair was cropped short for practicality, and her gray eyes held a distance that made her seem older than her years. Around her, alien prisoners whispered and pointed at the strange, soft-skinned creature that somehow survived frontline combat. Commander Rolf stood in his luxury cell 3 rows ahead, afforded better accommodation due to his rank in the Cavrian military. His insectoid form towered over most other prisoners' chitness, armor gleaming under the harsh lights, compound eyes reflecting colors humans couldn't perceive. He noticed the human girl immediately, finding her presence amusing. "Look at that pathetic thing." Rolf's voice boomed through the cell block, translated automatically by the ship systems. The moisture-filled weakling that calls itself a soldier. Other prisoners turned to watch, some chuckling, others simply curious about what would happen next. Lucy didn't respond, her gaze fixed on some point beyond the walls, lost in memories of red desert sand and scorching Australian sun. Rolf continued, emboldened by the attention. "My forces crushed human colonies like insects underfoot. I watched them cry and beg, their soft bodies breaking so easily." He laughed, a clicking sound that echoed through the block. "And yet somehow, this tiny creature sits among warriors. What a joke the universe plays." A massive Thrasian prisoner joined in, his 4 arms gesturing dismissively. "Humans are barely worth the energy to kill." Garden Worlders pretending its strength. Lucy's jaw tightened slightly, the only visible reaction. She'd heard worse. She'd lived worse. Word from bullies meant little when you'd survived summer days that reached 50 degrees Celsius with limited water, or winter nights that dropped below freezing with only a bedroll between you and the hard ground. The ship suddenly shuddered. Emergency alarms blared as an automated voice announced a minor hull breach in the cargo section. Nothing critical, the system assured, but life support would need to compensate. Within minutes, temperature began dropping as the ship's systems struggled to maintain equilibrium. Rolf dismissed it initially, a minor inconvenience. These council ships are poorly maintained, but as the temperature continued falling, his confidence wavered. Cavrian biology required warmth. Their homeworld was a humid paradise where cold simply didn't exist. Around the cell block, prisoners began reacting to the dropping temperature. The massive warriors who'd seemed invincible started huddling together, their biology unprepared for environmental stress. Rolf's chitin began contracting, small cracks appearing along the joints as his body struggled to adapt. Lucy remained still, her breathing calm and measured. She'd removed her outer jacket and begun a series of simple exercises, movements designed to generate body heat and maintain circulation. Her breath didn't fog the air like the aliens around her. Her hands didn't shake. She looked perfectly comfortable. "Why isn't the human suffering?" someone muttered. The temperature dropped to near freezing. By human standards, it was cold but manageable. By the standards of species evolved on garden worlds with controlled climates, it was agony. Rolf found himself shivering uncontrollably, his earlier mockery forgotten as survival instinct kicked in. Lucy sat cross-legged now, conserving energy while her Earth-evolved biology handled the cold with practiced efficiency. She'd endured worse in the outback, nights when frost covered the ground and she'd had nothing but a small fire and her own body heat. This was uncomfortable, sure, but not dangerous. "What are you?" Rolf managed to ask through chattering mandibles, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance. Lucy looked at him for the first time since his mockery began. "I'm from Earth," she said simply, her voice steady. "This is what we call a cool evening." The statement hung in the air, incomprehensible to most of the aliens present. A cool evening. This temperature that had them desperately trying to survive was casual weather to this small human. Impossible, The Thracian warrior gasped. No world breeds such tolerance. Earth isn't most worlds, Lucy replied, returning to her meditation like calm. Everything there tries to kill you. The heat, the cold, the animals, the plants, the storms, the droughts, the floods. You adapt or you die. Simple as that. Ship systems finally stabilized the temperature after 3 hours of chaos. The automated voice apologized for the inconvenience as heating gradually returned to normal. Prisoners slowly emerged from their desperate huddles, exhausted and shaken. Lucy stood, stretched like she'd just finished a light workout, and put her jacket back on. She hadn't broken a sweat, hadn't shown fear, hadn't needed help or comfort or warmth from others. She'd simply existed through the crisis like it was. Nothing special. Rolf watched her from his cell, unable to process what he'd witnessed. His entire worldview had cracked like his chitin in the cold. He'd built his military career on the assumption of human weakness, had justified countless atrocities with the belief that they were inferior beings. But this girl, this young soldier who should have been the weakest among them, had weathered a crisis that left veteran warriors broken and terrified. She hadn't dominated through strength or technology. She'd simply endured with a patience born from surviving a world that made this seem mild. The mockery died in the cell block. Whispers replaced laughter. Lucy Grant sat back down in her cell, closed her eyes, and let herself rest while around her, alien warriors reconsidered everything they thought they knew about humanity. Rolf stared at his cracked chitin, then at the unbothered human, and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Fear, not of weapons or strength, but of something far more terrifying, the realization that he'd been wrong about everything. 3 days passed since the environmental crisis, and Rolf had recovered enough to feel ashamed of his weakness. Shame, for a Cavrian commander, was intolerable. It demanded action, demanded reassertion of dominance. Physical mockery had failed, so he turned to psychological warfare. "Tell me, human," Rolf called across the cell block during meal distribution, "do you dream of the colonies my forces destroyed?" Lucy accepted her ration tray without looking at him, settling into her usual corner. She'd expected this. Bullies always escalated when their first attempts failed. "I want you to know their names," Rolf continued, his voice taking on a cruel edge. "New Perth, we burned it from orbit. 2,000 humans turned to ash in seconds." He paused, watching for her reaction. "Covenant Station, we breached the hull and watched them suffocate. Children crying for parents who couldn't save them. Other prisoners shifted uncomfortably. This felt different from simple mockery. This was targeted cruelty designed to break someone's spirit." Rolf listed more colonies, more deaths, describing each with clinical detail. He spoke of families torn apart, of final moments filled with terror, of the creative ways his forces had made humans suffer. He expected tears, rage, breakdown, anything that would prove humans were emotionally fragile despite their physical resilience. Lucy ate her rations slowly, chewing each bite thoroughly like her mother taught her when food was scarce. When Rolf finally finished his litany of horrors, she set down her empty tray and looked at him directly. "Are you finished?" she asked, her tone neither angry nor sad, just patient. The question confused him. "Don't you feel anything? I just described the deaths of your people." "I feel plenty," Lucy said. "But on Earth, loss is constant. Drought takes your crops, floods wash away your home. Predators take your livestock and sometimes your family." She thought of her brother, 12 years old when the crocodile pulled him under. "You carry the grief and you keep moving, because stopping means dying. That's not coldness. That's millions of years of evolution teaching us to survive anyway." Her calm acceptance unsettled Rolf more than tears would have. He'd wanted to wound her, but she'd somehow turned his weapon into a lesson about human adaptability. Ship-wide announcements interrupted the tension. Supply problems from the hull breach meant severe rationing for all prisoners. Each species would receive minimal nutrition for their biology, enough to survive, but barely. The voyage would take another 2 weeks. Within days, the effects showed. Cavrian biology demanded frequent feeding to maintain their impressive size and strength. Rolf began losing mass, his chitin dulling, movements becoming sluggish. Other prisoners fared similarly, their powerful bodies consuming energy faster than the rations could replace. Lucy's metabolism, evolved for feast and famine cycles, shifted smoothly into conservation mode. Her body had done this countless times growing up in the outback, where sometimes you went days between proper meals. She showed other prisoners breathing techniques to reduce energy expenditure, explained how to move efficiently to preserve strength. "How are you not starving?" Rolf finally asked, his pride eroded by desperation. "Human biology is designed for scarcity," Lucy explained. "Our ancestors spent hundreds of thousands of years not knowing where the next meal came from. We can go weeks on minimal food if needed. Our bodies just slow down and conserve." She demonstrated the breathing pattern. "It's not comfortable, but it's manageable." A young Thracian prisoner named Korvik watched her with something approaching awe. "My world provides. Food grows year-round. Water flows freely. We never learn to want." He looked at his forearms, once powerful, now trembling with weakness. "We trained for strength, but you trained just to exist." Lucy nodded. "Earth doesn't care about your training schedule. It kills you if you're not ready every single day. You learn efficiency or you don't survive childhood." Rolf listened from his cell, the pieces of his worldview continuing to crumble. Every torture his forces inflicted on human colonies. Those people had endured worse just growing up. The starvation tactics he'd considered cruel were mild compared to what these creatures handled routinely. He'd tried to break a species that was forged in perpetual hardship. Then the disease came. A bacterial infection spread through the prisoner section, affecting most oxygen-breathing species. The ship's medical supplies were limited, priority given to crew. Prisoners would have to rely on their own immune systems. Panic spread faster than the illness. Species from paradise worlds had weak immune responses, their bodies unprepared for aggressive pathogens. Fever swept through the cells, turning powerful warriors into shivering wrecks. Lucy developed symptoms on day 2. Mild fever, some congestion, fatigue. She treated it like the numerous infections she'd survived growing up. Rest when possible, stay hydrated, let her immune system do its job. Earth's disease-rich environment had created humans with aggressive, adaptable immune responses. She'd been sick worse from drinking bad water as a child. Rolf's fever hit hard on day 3. His chitin cracked from temperature fluctuations, fluids seeping from joints. He could barely lift his head. In his delirium, he saw the humans he'd tortured standing over him, judging him. Through fevered eyes, he watched Lucy moving between cells, offering water to those who needed it, showing them how to position themselves to breathe easier. She still looked functional despite being sick herself. "What are you?" he whispered, the question becoming his mantra of confusion and fear. Lucy heard him but didn't answer. She was checking on Korvik, who developed a severe fever. The young Thracian reminded her of her brother somehow. Same innocent eyes, same trust. She couldn't save her brother from the crocodile, but maybe she could help this one. As she worked, other prisoners stopped seeing her as weak. They saw something terrifying instead, a creature from a world so harsh that disease, starvation, and environmental extremes were just normal challenges. A species that had conquered the worst planet in known space and emerged stronger for it. Rolf watched her through his fever, understanding creeping through his delirium. Humans weren't weak despite their soft skin. They were terrifying because they'd survived everything and still chose kindness. Every cruelty he'd inflicted, they'd endured worse and hadn't become monsters. He'd mocked human suffering, never realizing that suffering had made them stronger than any Paradise World warrior. As consciousness faded, his last thought was simple and horrifying. We never stood a chance against them. The disease claimed 3 prisoners by the 5th day. Their bodies simply couldn't fight the infection without medical intervention. Rolf lay in his cell, convinced he'd be next, his fever so high that his chitin had started permanently discoloring. He hallucinated constantly, seeing ghosts of his victims demanding justice. Lucy observed him from across the cell block. She'd recovered mostly, her immune system having cleared the worst of the infection. Other prisoners expected her to let Rolf die. He deserved it after everything he'd done. But But she remembered her mother's words, spoken over a campfire under impossible stars. Surviving means staying human, not becoming the thing that hurt you. She requested permission from the guards to enter Rolf's cell. They laughed, finding dark humor in the situation, but allowed it. Lucy knelt beside the fevered commander with a damp cloth and her water ration. Rolf's compound eyes struggled to focus on her. "Why?" he managed through cracked mandibles. "Because I can help and you need it," Lucy said simply. She began cooling his fever with the cloth, propping him up to help him breathe. Her movements were efficient, learned from caring for sick animals in the outback when veterinary help was days away. "I killed your people," Rolf whispered, his defenses crumbling under fever and shame. "I know," Lucy replied, adjusting his position. "But letting you die won't bring them back. It'll just make me into someone I don't want to be." The psychological dam broke. Rolf began confessing, words tumbling out between labored breaths. He described the atrocities he'd committed, how he'd convinced himself humans were inferior to justify his actions. He'd come from a comfortable world where resources were abundant and conflicts rare. Military service was a status symbol, not a necessity. He chose cruelty because it made him feel powerful. Lucy listened without judgment, continuing her care. She'd learned that sometimes people needed to speak their sins aloud, needed witness to their shame. It didn't absolve them, but was a necessary step. "On Earth, we have a saying," Lucy said, wiping his fevered brow. "Kicking someone who's already down doesn't make you strong. It just makes you cruel. You're down, Rolf, but I'm not cruel." The statement hit harder than any physical blow. Rolf realized he'd spent his entire military career being what this young human refused to become. He'd kicked the down, tortured the helpless, murdered the defenseless. And here she was, showing mercy to the being who'd mocked her suffering. Over the next 2 days, Lucy's care kept Rolf alive through the worst of the fever. Other prisoners watched this act of mercy with growing understanding. Whispers spread. The human helps even her enemy. Young Korvik recovered enough to move, began helping Lucy tend to other sick prisoners. Lucy taught them basic care techniques. How to manage fever, ensure hydration, maintain sanitation. She organized the healthier prisoners into a rotation system, making sure the sick were never alone. Guards noticed the death rate decreasing and sent additional medical supplies. Rolf, emerging from his fever, watched Lucy work tirelessly. She slept maybe 3 hours a night, constantly moving between patients. She treated everyone equally, regardless of species or crimes. He finally understood what had defeated his forces. Not human weapons, but human persistence. You couldn't break people who refused to stop caring. "How do you do it?" Rolf asked when Lucy sat briefly to rest. "After everything my kind did to yours." Lucy considered the question carefully. "Holding on to hate would make me sick in a different way," she said. "Earth taught me to survive. My family taught me to stay human while doing it. Choosing revenge over compassion would mean Earth won and humanity lost. I'm afraid of what humans represent," Rolf admitted. "A species that endures hell and chooses kindness anyway." "We don't always choose kindness," Lucy corrected. "But we try, because the alternative is becoming monsters, and we've seen enough monsters." An announcement interrupted them. Prisoners were being transferred to different facilities in 3 days. High-value prisoners like Rolf would go to maximum security. Low-threat prisoners like Lucy would go to rehabilitation colonies. Their paths would separate. Rolf felt unexpected panic at this news. He'd started seeing Lucy as something between a teacher and a conscience. Her presence reminded him that change was possible. 3 days, he said quietly. Lucy nodded. "Enough time to make sure you're strong enough for the transfer." They fell into a pattern during those final days. Lucy would bring Rolf his rations, check his recovery, answer his endless questions about Earth. Other prisoners gathered during these conversations, fascinated by the human perspective. "Tell us about your world," Korvik asked one evening. "What makes a Deathworld?" Lucy thought about red deserts and deadly wildlife. "Earth has every ecosystem you can imagine, and every single one is trying to kill you," she began. "Predators in every environment, diseases in every water source, whether that shifts from deadly heat to freezing cold, plants that are poisonous, animals that are venomous, terrain that actively works against survival. How did your species not go extinct? A Balvian prisoner asked. We adapted, Lucy said. We learned to make tools, build shelters, create communities. We survived because we worked together and never gave up. Individual humans are vulnerable. Together, we're unstoppable. Rolf listened, understanding dawning. That's why you helped me. Not because I deserved it, but because working together is what humans do. Partly, Lucy agreed. Also, because leaving you to die would have diminished me. Every choice we make shapes who we become. I chose to stay human. On the final night before transfer, Rolf approached Lucy's cell. Guards had relaxed protocols, knowing separation was imminent. He offered her his water ration. A small gesture, but meaningful. I cannot undo what I did, Rolf said, but I can acknowledge what you taught me. Strength isn't about dominating others. It's about enduring hardship without becoming cruel. Lucy accepted the water. You're learning. That's more than I expected. If I had met you before the war, Rolf began, maybe you would have been different, Lucy finished. But you met me when you needed to. What you do with that is your choice now. They sat in silence, prisoner and former enemy, both changed by circumstances neither had anticipated. Tomorrow they'd separate, likely forever, but for this moment, they shared something rare in the universe. Mutual understanding forged through suffering and unexpected mercy. Lucy looked at the stars through the viewport, thinking of home. Rolf looked at her, thinking of redemption, and the other prisoners looked at both of them, reconsidering everything they thought they knew about strength, survival, and what it meant to be truly powerful. Transfer morning arrived with mechanical efficiency. Guards processed prisoners by destination, separating them into different transport shuttles. Lucy packed her minimal belongings, ready for whatever came next. Rolf watched from his cell, knowing this was goodbye. He requested permission to speak with Lucy before departure. Guards denied it, citing security protocols. He could only watch helplessly as she was led away with 14 other low-threat prisoners. Lucy glanced back once, a brief acknowledgement. Then she was gone. Lucy's shuttle headed toward a colony world called New Haven, designated for rehabilitation programs. She'd work in agricultural development, helping terraform harsh environments. Rolf's high-security vessel traveled to a military tribunal station where he'd face judgment for war crimes. Execution was likely. During the 3-day journey, Lucy processed what had happened. She hadn't set out to change anyone's mind about humans. She'd simply acted according to her values, shaped by Earth's harsh lessons. She wondered if making a difference to one person mattered in the grand scope of things. She decided it did, even if that person was her enemy. New Haven's transport landing revealed a world of rocky terrain, thin atmosphere, and extreme temperature variations. Most species found it barely habitable, requiring environmental suits. Lucy stepped out in basic clothing, immediately comfortable. The rehabilitation officers noted this with interest. Director Haven, a cautious Centauri administrator, greeted the newcomers. You'll work, learn, and prepare for reintegration into society, he explained. Those who demonstrate genuine change may eventually gain freedom. Those who don't will serve full sentences. Lucy was assigned to agricultural development. The soil was poor, water scarce, native pests aggressive. Other workers struggled despite advanced technology. Lucy examined the land, seeing immediate parallels to outback conditions. She began making suggestions based on Earth farming techniques. Within weeks, the struggling agricultural program showed improvement. Lucy's practical knowledge proved invaluable. She identified which Earth plants might thrive here, how to maximize water retention, natural pest control methods. Director Haven took notice of this unusual human who treated impossible conditions as normal challenges. Meanwhile, Rolf arrived at the tribunal station, facing immediate interrogation. Prosecutors presented evidence of his war crimes. Holographic displays showed destroyed colonies, casualty lists, testimony from survivors. He didn't deny anything, accepting full responsibility. His defense attorney was frustrated by his refusal to minimize his actions. The trial began with Rolf sitting before a panel of judges from various species. They questioned his motives, his orders, his decisions. He answered honestly, describing his mindset at the time. I believe humans were weak because I needed them to. He admitted. Admitting their strength meant admitting my cruelty had no justification. The courtroom went silent. Such honest self-condemnation was unusual in war crime trials. Judges typically heard denial, justification, blame shifting. Rolf offered none of that. Prosecutors presented video footage from the prison ship. Security recordings showed Rolf mocking Lucy, then the environmental crisis where she remained calm while he suffered. Further footage showed Lucy caring for him during the disease outbreak, despite his cruelty. The judges watched as the proud commander broke down and rebuilt. They were confused by what this meant for sentencing. How do you judge someone who'd already judged themselves? Rolf was given a chance to speak. He didn't ask for mercy or reduced sentencing. Instead, he described what he learned from Lucy. I torture humans because I thought they were inferior, he said. I was wrong about everything. They're not weak, they're terrifying in there. Adaptability and incomprehensible in their capacity for mercy. He requested his execution be public, so his people would understand the cost of underestimating humanity. The judges looked at each other, uncertain how to proceed. Back at New Haven, Lucy's reputation spread beyond agriculture. Other prisoners sought her advice on various challenges. She helped engineers solve problems using simple Earth physics. She taught cooks how to make nutritious meals from limited ingredients. Her approach was always practical, never preachy. Director Haven investigated this unusual human. Reviewing her file, he discovered her background, her capture, her service record. He found reference to her interaction with Commander Rolf. Curious, he requested the prison ship security footage. After watching the recordings, Haven made a decision. He contacted the tribunal station, requesting permission to provide testimony about rehabilitation potential. The judges, intrigued, granted permission. Haven prepared to travel, bringing Lucy with him. Lucy was surprised when informed she'd be traveling to the tribunal station. Rolf's trial is concluding. Haven explained, your presence isn't required, but your testimony might matter. Lucy was conflicted. She'd saved Rolf's life, but wasn't sure she wanted to save him from justice. Still, she agreed to go, wanting to see for herself if his change was real. During the journey, Haven asked why she'd helped Rolf. Lucy thought about her mother's teaching. The measure of a person is what they do when it costs them something, she said. Helping Rolf cost me nothing but effort. Not helping would have cost me part of myself. Haven realized this human possessed a moral clarity most species lacked. He wondered if all Deathworlders shared this trait, or if Lucy was exceptional among her kind. They arrived at the military station, and Lucy felt the weight of its purpose. This was where justice was served for war crimes. She was escorted to a waiting area with transparent walls overlooking the courtroom. Rolf sat in the defendant's chamber, looking smaller than she remembered. Their eyes met through the barrier. Rolf's expression showed shock, hope, then shame. He had no right to expect her help. Lucy's face remained neutral. She hadn't decided what she'd say. Guards called her name. Time for testimony. Lucy stood, straightened her simple prison uniform, and walked toward the courtroom entrance. Rolf watched, knowing his fate might rest on her words. Haven observed both of them, curious what would unfold. The courtroom doors opened. Lucy stepped inside, ready to tell the truth, wherever it led. She owed Rolf nothing, owed the court honesty, and owed herself the integrity to stay human regardless of the cost. What happened next would reveal whether mercy could coexist with justice, whether redemption was possible for those who'd committed atrocities, and whether a Deathworld girl's choice to help her enemy meant anything beyond that one moment on a prison ship. Lucy entered the courtroom, refusing to be intimidated by its design. High ceilings, holographic evidence displays, judges from multiple species, all meant to make witnesses feel small. She'd faced worse in dust storms. Justice Cross, the lead Valdrin judge, addressed her. State your name and relationship to the defendant. Lucy Grant, former soldier, Currently rehabilitation worker, she replied clearly. I was imprisoned on the same transport as Commander Rolf. The prosecution asked her to describe Rolf's behavior during that time. Lucy took a breath and chose her words carefully. She would tell the truth wherever it led. She recounted Rolf's mockery in detail, his boasts about destroying colonies, his attempt to cause psychological pain, his cruelty toward human suffering. She didn't minimize or excuse his actions. The courtroom listened intently, Rolf's shame visible even from the defendant's chamber. Lucy described the environmental crisis, the starvation period, the disease outbreak. She presented these as facts, explaining how Rolf's confidence crumbled when his physical advantages meant nothing against simple survival challenges. Then she reached the pivotal moment. The prosecution interrupted. Why would you help the being who mocked your suffering? Lucy paused, looking at Rolf, then back to the judges. Because letting him die would have made me like him. She explained that Earth's harshness taught humans to survive, but humanity taught them to remain compassionate. The strongest survivors aren't those who become cruel. They're those who endure without losing themselves. The courtroom went silent. That answer wasn't what anyone expected. Defense attorney asked if she observed genuine change in Rolf. Lucy considered honestly. He stopped seeing me as inferior and started seeing me as a person. Is that enough to excuse his crimes? No, but it might be enough to make his future different from his past. She refused to advocate for leniency, only truth. Let the judges decide justice. Director Haven testified next, presenting data from New Haven. He showed Lucy's impact on the rehabilitation program, arguing that if a human from a Deathworld could choose mercy over vengeance, perhaps the court could consider rehabilitation over execution. He wasn't defending Rolf, just questioning what justice truly served. Rolf was given his final statement. He stood, addressing Lucy directly. You saved my life when I deserved to die. You taught me what strength really means. He turned to the judges. Execute me if you must. I won't run for what I did, but know that a human from Earth, who had every reason to hate me, chose differently. The judges deliberated for hours. Lucy and Haven waited outside in silence. Finally, they were called back. Justice Cross delivered the verdict, guilty on all counts as expected, but the sentence surprised everyone. Life imprisonment instead of execution. Rolf would serve at maximum security with no parole. However, he'd participate in an experimental rehabilitation program, recording testimonials about the war to help educate others about the cost of supremacist ideology. His life would become a lesson, not a martyr's death. Rolf accepted the sentence with dignity. He thanked the court, then turned to Lucy. I wish I had met you before the war. Maybe I would have been different. Maybe, Lucy responded, but you met me when you needed to. Guards led him away. He didn't resist. Lucy was granted a brief, private moment with Rolf before his transfer. They sat separated by a transparent barrier. What will you do now? Rolf asked. Return to New Haven, continue my work, maybe eventually go home to Earth, Lucy said. And you helped me even knowing you'd never see the results, Rolf observed. On Earth, we plant trees knowing we might never see them fully grown, Lucy explained. We do it because someone planted trees for us. You were cruel. You caused terrible suffering, and you'll pay for that. But if you actually change, if you use your imprisonment to prevent others from following your path, then maybe something good grows from all this pain. Rolf understood. This was as close to forgiveness as he'd receive. Lucy stood to leave. After hesitation, Rolf placed his hand against the barrier. Lucy mirrored the gesture. Survive, she told him, using the word deliberately. I will, he promised, and she believed him. Lucy traveled back to New Haven with Director Haven. She was quiet, processing the emotional weight. Haven asked if she thought Rolf would truly change. I don't know, she admitted, but I gave him the chance. What he does with it is his choice. Word of the trial spread through galactic channels. Human compassion toward a war criminal became a talking point. Some viewed it as weakness, others as incomprehensible strength. Humans gain a reputation. Dangerous because they're hard to kill, terrifying because they might spare you anyway. Lucy returned to her agricultural work at New Haven. Projects she'd started had flourished in her absence. She was offered early release due to her contributions in conduct. She accepted, ready to return to Earth. Before leaving, Director Haven made an unexpected proposal. The Galactic Council wanted to establish more rehabilitation colonies. They needed consultants who understood both hardship and compassion. He offered Lucy a position helping design programs across multiple worlds. She'd consider it, but first she needed to go home. Lucy's transport landed at an Australian spaceport. She stepped onto red desert soil, felt the familiar heat. Her family waited, older, marked by worry and time. They embraced without words. Home, with all its dangers, welcomed her back. That night, Lucy sat outside under stars. The desert was alive with sounds. Insects, distant dingoes, wind through scrub. She'd survived alien war, imprisonment, disease, and emotional trials, but Earth, deadly. Earth still felt like the hardest challenge. And that's exactly why humans like her could survive anywhere. A data packet arrived through official channels. Rolf's first recorded testimony. Lucy debated whether to watch. She did, hearing him describe their encounter honestly. He ended with, "If a human can choose mercy, we have no excuse for choosing cruelty." Lucy contacted Haven, accepting the consultant position. She'd spend half her time on Earth, half traveling to rehabilitation worlds. She'd teach what she learned, survival without losing compassion. Months passed. Lucy traveled between worlds, receiving occasional updates on Rolf's progress. He was following through, his testimonials being used in military academies. They'd never be friends. The wounds were too deep, but they'd changed each other, and through that change, might change others. Lucy sat in a council chamber, advising on prisoner treatment protocols. She argued for dignity, for the chance at redemption. "My world tried to kill me every day," she told assembled representatives. "It made me strong enough to survive anything, including the temptation to become cruel. That's what Deathworlders offer, strength tempered by choice." Her philosophy spread. Humans, the supposed weaklings, redefined strength throughout the galaxy. Not through domination, but through endurance and mercy. Rolf, in his cell, watched new recruits learn from his mistakes. He served his sentence knowing that one human's choice saved more than his life. The story concluded with a simple truth. The universe had underestimated humanity, assuming soft skin meant soft spirit. They learned too late that Earth's harshness didn't create monsters. It created survivors who understood suffering well enough to choose compassion anyway, and that made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy.